Hey, I'm Coit. Thanks for checking out our video. I hope you enjoy what you see here in the next few minutes. I don't know if you got here by YouTube or if you did happen to go through our website, but if you didn't go to our website, it's just www.liveinthewild.com. Be sure and check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. Now, what I'm talking to you about today is mostly hunting. Hunting and fishing have been my two main passions in life. I've been able to do both of them now for about the last 50 years, so got a little bit of experience with it. I've also been a taxidermist for a little over 40 years, and I've talked to a lot of hunters and fishermen, and that's what I want to be sharing with you today. Just some good strategies and tactics to make you more successful. One of our goals in making our website, in order for us to continue to enjoy the hunting and fishing, have places to hunt and fish and enjoy it, is to bring more people into the sport. And the best way to bring people in, I think, is to make them successful at it. In other words, if we can invite somebody to go fishing with us, let's invite them in the spring or the fall, number one, when the weather's real pretty. And let's be sure and take them when we're not going to be gone all day. And let's be sure and take them and be sure they catch some fish. Ran into a boy the other day. We'd been floating down a creek, and he said, "I'm never going to do that again." Said bugs ate me up, and it was miserable. So, if we're going to teach a new generation about hunting and fishing, let's make them successful. And some of the things I'm going to share with you today will help, help people, I think, be a little more successful in their hunting adventures. The first thing I want to talk to you about today is as far as hunting, is the white-tailed deer. And I want to talk to you not necessarily about just hunting and how to kill a white-tailed deer, but I want to talk to you about harvesting mature white-tailed bucks. Now, there's a big difference in just hunting deer and hunting trophy bucks. And a big buck, depending on what area you live in, is anywhere from 3.5 to 4.5 years old and up. And when he gets that age, he's a different creature. So you have to hunt him different. One of the first things I'll tell you about is for the areas that I hunt in here in the South. Now, we are in the South. What I'm going to tell you will apply to Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi areas, and I'm sure some of the things will override different parts of the country. But most of my experience has been in the South, so that's what we're going to be talking about. I mostly hunted in areas where there was a good bit of hunting pressure. Other people hunted in the same general area. And what I found out, the first thing I want to tell you about is early season hunting. If you put out trail cameras like I do and watch the deer year round, you'll find out that the mature bucks will get together and travel together in groups, and then the young bucks and the does travel together. And these early season bucks, I call them, are let's say in our part of the country, say up until about October, these bucks stay together, they travel together. And they're very predictable. They're not being disturbed. They're fairly relaxed. There's plenty of food, good food sources, most everywhere in the woods. They got plenty of acorns, plenty of browse. And the problem is, after the hunting season comes in, the first few days, all of a sudden, where these woods have been real quiet and isolated, suddenly there's hunters everywhere. There's people in the woods. And what happens is, when people are in the woods, they disturb these deer. They leave human scent. Forces these deer to change these patterns they've had for the summer and early fall. Well, now all of a sudden these deer that you had patterned have disappeared. So if there's a secret to early season hunting, I would say find you a nice place and be ready that first morning, and try to get the first day or two of hunting before they change that pattern. And not only do they change that pattern, what happens is they become more nocturnal. They won't even move around during daylight. We've all had this scenario take place. You scout out. Maybe you don't put up the trail cameras, but you scout it out and you find all a good food source. Especially like in our part of the country, maybe white oak acorns. Just find them, and maybe deer drop-ins, and you say, "Well, this would be a good place to hunt." Well, you hunt it for weeks and weeks, and all you see is does and young bucks. Well, see, the problem is these bucks have gone nocturnal. And the deer basically is nocturnal. Now, there is a time when that buck is very vulnerable, and that's called the rut. That's when I try to do most of my hunting now. During the rut, instead of moving right at dusky dark, you'll be able to see him anytime during the day. It's real common place I used to live in Marengo County, going to work and coming back during the rut, you'd see a doe hop across the road, or sometimes you wouldn't even see the doe maybe, but you just look out and see this buck. And instead of, seeing real alert and looking around, I can just visualize so many times I've seen them, they'd have their head down and they wouldn't be looking left or right, but they're just steady walking. He's either following a doe or going where a doe was been earlier. He's just a different animal during the rut, a lot easier to kill him. This is true because a lot of the pay hunt areas, if you go on a place where you hunt by the day or anything, a lot of times they raise the rates during the rut. They know the odds are a lot better too. Now the rut can be affected whenever I take off my time. The way I work for myself doing taxidermy work, my days off is kind of flexible. And if I do plan to go during the rut and say it turns off warm, I'll delay my time to hunt. If it turns off warm during the rut, they still will rut, but they're later getting up still going to be late, almost at dark, before they get up and start moving around. But as long as the weather's nice and cold, you're liable to see them any time of day during the rut. Don't worry about hunting early in the morning, right at dark. Stay in your stand as long as you can. Now, when is the rut? It all depends on your part of the country. Even here in Florida, from county to county, it's amazing how this rut varies. One way I've learned to tell when the rut is by my trail cameras. With my trail cameras, I can see the old does all summer long, watch them getting bigger and bigger, with their fawns in them. And then one day the does will come to the cameras and all of a sudden you can tell they've dropped their fawns. Just backdate that 200 days. The gestation period for deer is right at 200 days. And then you'll know about when your rut was. You won't see the fawns for a week or two, but you can tell on those cameras, when the does have dropped their fawns. When there's pressure on him, it's just his nature. He's got vision to see at night, and he's basically a nocturnal animal. So we got to hunt smart to kill him once he gets to be a mature buck. Now, once he has been disturbed, you can still hunt him, but you got to hunt him different. He's still going to be coming to those same food sources, but he's just coming there, after dark, after we've already left. And this is harder to do, but what you have to do is you have to find these more secluded areas where he's bedding up and literally push back into those areas. And it's not as much fun because you get back in there and it's thicker, you can't see as much. A lot of times you'll just be hunting, maybe one trail. A good friend of mine, Trey Wright in Mobile, had a perfect example of that this year. He put out trail cameras in some thicker areas on these trails, found the bucks. After the first few days of the season, there was some other hunters, all in there, and I don't think he's seen some of those bucks since then. So the thing he has to do now is he's going to just have to move farther back into the woods, farther back into the thick areas where these bucks are laying up, and just try to catch them, as they get up, later in the day, and instead of hunting them in those open areas where he had found them earlier. I'll give you an example. We had a place we hunted in Octagon, Alabama for years. And the people live there on the property where we hunted. And just out of respect for them, we wouldn't ever park, close to their house. We'd drive on back quarter mile or so behind their house to where we would park and then begin our hunting. And we did this for years. One day, it would have been raining for several days and all the roads were just real bad. And I was by myself, so I parked up there closer to the house. And instead, of driving in where we usually drive, I was going to walk in. Well, instead of walking the road the way we drove in, I was going to cut the little shortcut there, just a little small thicket-looking area. And it was kind of drizzling rain, so I was not making any noise. And all of a sudden, I get right on the edge of this thicket, and this nice buck jumps up. And, it just startled me, and I couldn't even begin to get a shot at him. It just totally, I wasn't expecting it at all. But I thought about that buck many a time. He was at least, like we're talking about, a mature buck, so a minimum of probably 4.5 years old. And I just wondered how many times he'd been laying in that thicket when we went driving by. This thicket it couldn't have been 30, 40 yards, right beside the road that we always drove in on. And how many times he'd been laying there, hear us drive by, we didn't slam our doors, but I'm sure, just pushing the doors to on the truck. If we had four-wheelers, getting them out. And then at the end of the day, right at dusky dark, he'd hear us come back and load up, and we'd drive back by him. And then he'd get up and go about his business for the night. So it was just a good example. And this happens, I promise you, this scenario happens a lot of times over and over. Another time, I was hunting in an area that I'd been hunting this area for years, and I'd had this old tree stand overlooking a nice open area that the cows had been moved out of it, and the man that owned the land had quit bush hogging it. So where it used to be kind of an open area, and I could see under a lot of oak trees, it had really grown up into a tremendous thicket. I mean, it was head high, just real thicket out there. And I hadn't hunted this stand in a couple of years, and one afternoon I said, well, I'm gonna, go back over there and try it. So I climbed up in this tree, overlooking this thicket, because I could still see under some oak trees and a couple of logging rows to my right. And I won't ever forget it. About 10 or 15 minutes before dark, this deer stands up out in the middle of that thicket, probably 150 yards from me. And, I'm looking at him with binoculars, and I can just see the back half of him. And what I notice is, he doesn't move, and I can't tell if it's a buck or a doe. And after a few minutes, he finally reached around and he was licking. I could just see a back half of him, and he was kind of licking his back. And then I could see a good antler. I knew he was a good mature buck. So I'm hoping he's going to come on out of this thicket, because it's going to be a job to get him out of there if I shoot him in this thicket. But I waited as long as I could right there at dusky dark, and I finally shot him. But he fell in the bed he was laying in. He never made a step to get out of that thicket. So there again, it's just a good example of how a deer will get up early, but as far as going to the food source on into the season, it's going to take him a while to get there.